I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so I've been waiting for this interview for quite some time now. So we have Tiffany Shlain on the line, and she's going to be launching a book with us in Women Connect for Good. Big shout out to Dr. Nancy for making that intro to Tiffany. And Tiffany is an artist, a filmmaker, and so much more. Today we're going to get into the book just a little bit because we'll be bringing Tiffany back on the show later when the book is out and live. But Tiffany also has a ton of other projects and films and things she's working on. So the teen brain film, she's got a whole lot more. She's got an art show coming up in NYC, on and on. We're going to get into all this. But before we do, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all. First off, Tiffany, welcome. So happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here.
So, Tiffany, we're going to start it with our Mission Matters minute. So, at Mission Matters, Tiffany, our aim is to amplify stories. We get them out for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Tiffany, what mission matters to you?
The mission that matters to me is telling stories and history in new ways. So I'm just finishing a film on the teen brain, and I'm taking very complicated neuroscience and making it accessible for teens and the adults that love them, and parents and educators.
Yeah.
And one of the big artworks I've done recently is called Dendrofeminology, a feminist history tree ring. And like the timelines you see at national parks, I have
Mhm.
reimagined the timeline on a slice of tree to be about a feminist history tree ring. So both of
Mhm.
those are examples, like a lot of my films and work is telling stories in new ways or reimagining and highlighting histories you don't normally hear about. So women's histories, feminist
Mhm.
histories in my work.
Yeah, it's amazing, and we're glad to have you here. And I want to get further into this work, but I guess just to get us kicked off, Tiffany, how, like, as an artist, a filmmaker, a lot of different directions you can choose for your career. You mentioned the theme a lot to support in supporting women topics, issues around feminism and helping and equality. Like, how did you know? Like, was this a progression? Had you always started here with your art and with your craft, or like how'd you get here?
That's such a great question. I mean, I think I always felt in my family, both my father and mother were feminists. My mother went back to school to get her PhD in psychology when I was 8. So I really watched her, and she wrote about successful women and their female mentors for her
Mhm.
dissertation. And then my father, who was a surgeon, he also wrote a lot about goddess culture. Like,
Wow.
how come in every civilization in the world, goddesses were worshipped? And what was the single event that kept happening that
Mm,
changed the sex of God from a woman to a man?
mm,
And he always thought women were almighty and powerful. And so I think from both of my parents, I really came from a place of strength. And then when you go out into the world, so if you grew up in a really feminist household where
mhm.
you can do anything, and then
Yeah.
you see the dynamics of society where that isn't the case. And so I think in a lot of my work, it felt like my responsibility
Mm,
to lift up the stories of women and fight for women's rights.
mm,
And I think, I've made a lot of films that deal with that, and now I'm making a lot of art dealing with that
mhm,
subject, sculptures. But I think all of my work is really, it usually comes from something I'm really interested in. Like,
mm.
I'm curious myself, like being a woman in the world. I also have 2 daughters, so
Yeah,
I have a husband who likes strong women. So I think just reframing that narrative through my work has
yeah.
been really important.
That's interesting to me. I mean, for many reasons, but even just your household dynamic growing up, for you to say your father, he's a surgeon and a feminist, like,
Yeah.
I've heard some variations of having that, but
I
normally
know
they're
it
not
sounds funny
normally they're not surgeons. Normally they're like, they were I'm not picking anybody. My dad was a hippie, whatever. So he was
well,
very open-minded when I, like whatever, but normally they're not surgeons. My dad wasn't a surgeon. I feel like that's pretty forward thinking or like or
yeah.
evolved. Or I don't even know what the word is there, but that's unique.
He was definitely extraordinary person, and I
Yeah.
think he had a strong mother. I think that he
Mm.
loved very much. But I think maybe it was having 2 daughters who are really strong, and I mean, I remember him telling me and my sister as young girls at the
Yeah.
time that we had an amazing power,
Mm.
almost the way he talked about it, that it was more powerful, and know how to treat it with respect and to do good in the
Mhm.
world. So I feel like from an early age, and then, he of course, he wrote these books about,
Yeah.
uh, women in power. I told you about the book about the alphabet, the goddess and goddess
Mhm.
culture, but he also wrote a book called Sex, Time, and Power: How Female Sexuality Shaped Human Evolution. So he wrote a
Wow.
lot about the brain and biology and power dynamics. So I think
Mm.
I've always been interested in that. And he passed away 15 years ago, but
Mm.
he had a strong influence. And then my mother, watching her, she was of the generation where really I think a lot of women felt like they had to decide of being a mother or having a career,
For sure.
went back to school. So I saw her, both of my parents loved what they did. So that was never a
Mhm.
question, like, love what you do and
Mm.
be your own boss. That was another big message, that because as a surgeon and a psychologist, they were their own bosses. So I that was all I and all three of the kids, my brother and sister and I, we are
Yeah.
all our own bosses. So it's really interesting on what they've instilled in me from a young age.
Mm.
Made a big
Yeah.
influence.
What about the entrepreneur? A lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs that watch this program as well. Like, what about that slant towards entrepreneurship? I feel like that was also like unique. Be your own boss. Like,
Mhm.
is that
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 is really
entrepreneurship side in the family that was
it
always
is,
condoned? It
and
sound yeah.
all of us are. I mean, I
That must make for an interesting, like, whatever the holiday is, conversation. You have all these entrepreneurs, all these feminists getting
it's a
together,
funny
like, to be
thing, like,
a fly on your wall, like, and during whatever holiday you're celebrating is interesting.
it is interesting because I don't, like, use the entrepreneur label. I remember a woman recently invited me to this
Yeah,
entrepreneur event. She's like, "You're such an entrepreneur," because I founded the Webby Awards in my
yeah.
20s,
I
and I
saw
found
that, and I'm like, that's I mean, you may not like the word entrepreneur, whatever, I'm not saying you said that, but,
it's
like, you
actually
are an
it I
entrepreneur.
it's funny, I just have never, like, used it as one of I'd be like, "I'm a filmmaker, I'm an artist,"
Yeah.
but I would never forefront entrepreneur because it's just a vehicle to do all these big
Yep.
projects I wanna do. So, when I ran the Webby Awards for, 10 years, I was running a business, a lot of employees, and then I sold that to start a film studio, and now I haven't, and I'm still making films, and I'm also making a lot of art and doing a lot of art
Mhm.
exhibits, and they're all businesses on some level. I mean, you
Of
have to
course.
all big ideas take money and management and
Yeah.
insurance, like proposals but I think that's very much in my DNA. But
Yeah.
I've always, especially now and where I am in life after I've done so many different kinds of projects, like
Mhm.
from the Webby Awards to lots of films to a
Mhm.
book to these art exhibits. And I with Dr. Nancy, we had in the National Women's History Museum,
Mm.
we had my sculpture Dendrofeminology, a feminist history tree ring, installed on the National Mall this last November, and we did a lot
Mm.
of feminist activations around it, which was really exciting. And they're all, kind of big ideas that I need to
Yeah,
somehow make happen.
for sure.
And at this point in my life, I do go through a process of how do I make something happen? Because it's about
Mm.
visualizing the idea, bringing the support around you to make that idea happen,
Yeah.
building a coalition of partners to make that happen, and then
Mhm.
and then you make it happen.
Yeah.
So, even though they have different manifestations, whether it's a film in a movie theater or it's a book you read or it's
Mm.
a sculpture you see, like, they all take these kind of
Mm.
processes to make it happen.
Yeah. So I wanna take that a step forward. I like to work in kind of one of those pay it forward type questions whenever I can. So for the creatives out there, like that have these big dreams as well, but like you said, you have to assemble a team. You have to figure out ways to make your idea a reality. Whatever word we're using, entrepreneurship, whatever the word is, right? And like, what kind of advice would you give to, let's just say, the new group of creatives that aren't quite as established as you? They're just kind of getting started. They got these ideas, they want to do these things, and in today's marketplace, like, what would you tell them?
Sorry about that. I hope you might have heard my dog
We're
barking.
dog friendly. We're dog friendly, kid friendly, cats. I want to see you can have some whiskers come across. It's okay.
Okay. So, what I would say is that build support around you, that
Mm.
there's people in your life that are a little further along in a career
Yeah.
path, and reach out to them, take them out, offer to take them out to lunch. Like,
Mm.
I think our society doesn't have the culture of like mentorship and apprentice, but
Ooh.
it's a beautiful model from a long
Yeah.
time ago that we should really bring into the world today. But there's so many people that I wouldn't officially say like you're my mentor,
Yeah.
but they were. I mean,
Yeah.
I reached out to them, I asked them for advice, took them out to lunch,
Hmm.
kept them posted on projects, and I think there's mentors all around us. I mean,
Yeah.
older, younger, even younger, like with the social media these days, they
For
can mentor you.
sure.
But I mean, I think it's just a way of looking at the world that everyone has something to teach someone else. You
Mhm,
have something to teach someone,
mhm.
and somebody else has something to teach you. So really looking in your life at like what do you want to build on who you are
Yeah.
and who can help you get there. And I'm really into like I'm in part of a women film director group and we meet once a month. And when I wanted to
Mm.
write my first book, I was in a writing group with just three of us. It was three total, but we turned in 10 pages a month. And I
Wow.
think it's about that support. I think that's a big thing that especially entrepreneurs usually are thought of
Mm.
like they're not really working by themselves, but a lot of times
Yeah.
they're and really having even if you own your own business or you're an artist or a filmmaker, which can be very solitary,
Mm.
to either create your own support group, create your own filmmaker group or artist group, and meet
Yeah.
once a month. That's all it takes to say, let's meet once a month and
Yeah.
share our wins and challenges. And you'd be surprised on how amazing that is.
Mm. Yeah, and I think sometimes what keeps people from doing that is like fear. Like they don't wanna connect. They're thinking about, I don't know if I'm ready to like get my project out there. I don't know. But like when you're having these meetings and stuff, you're not supposed to have everything figured out. Like I
That's right.
love that you bring up the concept of apprenticeship. When I think about like the formal apprenticeships way back in the day, if you wanted to, make shoes, you're probably what, 5, 7 year apprenticeship. You want to be a writer, you want to be this. We're talking 5, 7 year
Right.
apprenticeships just to be able to do something versus now I feel like sometimes people have this unrealistic expectation on themselves because because you can start something maybe quickly online or something else, but they
That's
feel
I
like they're
love that
supposed
you're
to have it
saying
all
that.
figured out.
Yeah, you need to put in the work, and I think, and one of the bummer I mean, listen, there's been so many great
Yeah,
things about the remote culture. I mean, as a
for sure.
working mom, it's amazing. I always ran my own business, so we always only went in twice a week. That was
Yeah,
like my company. You could be home 3 days a week, and we went in twice a week so we could work collaboratively.
yeah.
But the thing I worry about is there's so many remote work situations, and I interned at film studios, and I
Mhm.
would just watch them. I was doing the most menial tasks, but I was watching them do their meetings and negotiate and talk about things, and I learned so much from just being there. And
Yeah.
now there's so many people working remotely. The other piece of advice is like if there's any way that you can, you know, work somewhere where you're physically watching other
Mhm.
people do what you want to do in the world is so helpful.
Mm.
And that's not really a remote thing because I think the most I learned was in the cracks in between and
Yep.
things in between the meetings
It's the
and
conversations in between meetings. It's all the
exactly,
other things, like,
exactly.
that's where
Yeah,
the real knowledge is transferred, in my opinion.
yeah, completely.
Mhm. So, circling and thank you for that because I people hear me preach about it all day long, but now they hear you saying it, all right? So
Absolutely.
so go connect with people, all right? So,
Yeah,
getting back to today's scheduled.
it is. It's so simple and beautiful and human
Yeah.
and it just really takes you, yeah, having the
Mm.
courage to say, "I am going to write a book," or "I
Yeah.
am going to make a film," or "I am going to do an art exhibit."
Mhm.
Like, it does take that courage to make the first step, but even before you get to that, there's lots of mini steps you can do.
Mhm.
I eventually am gonna I have so many thoughts on this. I've made a lot of films. I used to have an original series called The Future Starts Here, and I
Mm.
had an episode about the creative process because first, just literally saying out loud you're about to do something, that puts a lot of energy towards doing
Oh,
the thing,
yeah.
you know?
For
So
me I always say, I'm on the hook for this. I said it publicly. Dang it." No.
exactly, exactly, even
That's,
when
like, always a mixed bag for me. I'm usually regret
no, but
whenever
it's a
I've
great
done
it's
that,
great
so
'cause it holds you accountable, like, when
I know, but it's more work, Tiffany.
my first book that I wrote, my family and I now almost 15 years, we turn
Mm.
off screens 1 day a week, and it's been this, like, life-saving.
Mm.
I just felt like the screens here, I founded the Webby Awards, and I'm super interested in technology, and then it
Yeah.
started taking over. So started turning off screens 1 day a week, and it helped so much. And then when I was nearing 10 years, I thought I
Mm.
need to write a book about this because it's this very ancient idea and anyone can do it. And it's this
Mhm.
ancient Jewish idea called Shabbat. And
Yep.
it's like yoga and meditation, like everyone can do it, just 1 day
Mhm.
rest, no work. And so when I decided to write the book, I thought, well, publicly now
Mhm.
everyone's going to know that my family, like I turn off my screens 1 day a week. So it was like
Yeah.
this major accountability, which I think is good.
Yeah.
And, even when I wanted to put the feminist history tree ring on the
Mm.
National Mall, I'm just finishing this film on the
Mhm.
teen brain, which It's a 10-minute film, and it's actually one
Mm.
of my favorite challenges is to take a really complicated
Yeah.
scientific, like, I've made a lot of films about neuroscience and take that idea and make it accessible for the public,
Mm.
and it's so funny, like, for the last year and a half when I was like, people are like, "What are you working on?" Or "What film?" And I talk about my art, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm making a film
Mm.
on the teen brain." And there's kind of an audaciousness to that, like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna make a film about the teen brain. And you say that like 400 times in a year, and it's like you're working on the film behind the scenes, but just saying it, you're just like
Yeah.
also helping to make it happen. Um,
Mm.
so I'm a big proponent when people are like, "Hey, what are you up to?" Like, try out an idea.
Yeah.
Like, even in small talk, it helps you get that courage of like you're making that thing happen.
Mm. So, Tiffany, so for everybody watching, so just to kind of tee up the book project, which we're not going to talk about that much today, as I mentioned before, but we're doing a book. It's a collaborative effort between Mission Matters, Women Connect for Good, an amazing group of authors that Dr. Nancy O'Reilly has curated and brought together. And we're not going to get too far into the content or anything like that today because Tiffany's coming back on the show. And that's the next interview I do with Tiffany. That's all we're going to talk about. But all I want to know, Tiffany, is are you excited?
Oh, I'm very excited about the book. I mean, it really is. Dr. Nancy has pulled together an amazing group of women,
Mm.
and a lot of us were in DC on the National Mall for my art project. So
Yeah.
it is a strong community
Like a
of
reunion
amazing.
all together.
It's amazing. I can't wait to read their chapters, and I loved working on mine. I love
Mm,
writing. It's very,
amazing.
very.
Let's
It helps you. I think writing to have to go deeply on a subject, it's like helping you clarify your thoughts on the
mm,
subject, and you have the time and the space to do it, and in our world, which is just flying by so quickly, you rarely get that kind of deep thinking time.
mm. I wanna get kind of a little bit of an overview of what your year looks like coming up next. So I know you have a art show coming up. You
It's so
got yeah,
exciting.
I mean, I want to
I
get
have a lot
into
of things
some
coming.
of
I know,
your
I'm
I
so
know
glad
you
you
got
asked.
so much going on. I can't keep up with you. I'm
It
like
is a busy year,
I
and,
was like, and I know even since the last time we talked, probably new things popped up. Like tell me what's going on this year
okay,
so far.
I was just meeting with someone yesterday because 'cause I'm working
I
with
knew
this,
it. I already
and
knew it. Go
I
ahead.
wanted to lay out. I've had years like this before. Like, I've been
Mm,
a creator making things, for like 30 years at this point, but this is gonna be a big 7 months because I
mm,
have the Teen Brain film coming out in the next couple weeks, and then I am going to just be creating art. I have all these new artworks that I'm gonna be making. I have a solo
mm,
exhibition in New York at Nancy Hoffman Gallery in Chelsea in New York that opens September 5th called
wow.
Human Nature. And then I have a art exhibition in Los Angeles that opens October 17th called Ancient Wisdom for a Future Ecology. And my
Mm,
husband and I are both co-collaborators on that. He's a professor at UC Berkeley in robotics, and he's also an artist. And we are making new artwork for that. So we just went down to
mm,
LA for a big museum walkthrough. And that's part of the Getty Museum has an initiative called Pacific Standard Time, and they bring
mm,
together all these museums, and we're in the Skirball Museum, and we're doing an art exhibition there all about ancient wisdom
mhm,
of a future for a future ecology, trees, time, and technology.
mm,
So the film, 2 art shows, and it's all about really time management. It
mm,
really comes down to that because, of course, creativity, you wanna be wild and, like, have all this time, which I have, but you have to carve out that time, and now I have to
mm,
carve out the time. I know all the ideas for each of the pieces, and now it's literally about making the artwork, and I love doing that. So, but there is
mm,
a lot happening in the same time period, so I just have to be, first of all, always take my days off on the weekends because
mm.
no screens, and that's when I completely reset. I think we're living in a time where people don't ever turn off their phones, so
Yeah.
they don't ever recharge. So that's part of my whole time management strategy. Every weekend I go off and I
Mm,
rejuvenate, and then I'm really gonna carve out time to be in the studio to be really creative and then
mm,
really to make the work. So
mm.
that's my plan for my very busy 7 months.
And you plan for so it sounds like you also plan for your creative times? Am
I
I
do.
off on that? That's really cool.
So
Like,
I have a
what goes
day.
into that? Like, what
Yeah,
goes into that?
Wednesday is, like, no meetings. So I
Yeah.
go to my studio, and I really try to have there's no meetings, and I am just in
No
flow.
meetings, probably very limited phone calls, like, anything else,
Yeah,
like, if you don't have to do something, then
that's
you're
right.
like, you wanna wake up pretty, like, light, right?
Yeah, you have to create space
Yeah.
to create and to think, and I do
Mm,
that a lot on my days without screens.
mm,
Most of my best ideas come on those days, and I look at creativity like an athlete, like,
yeah.
"Oh, when am I most creative? Without screens." So, that day is such a great day for me, and I try to have other little pockets throughout my day to think, because
Yeah.
I think we're living in a world that doesn't give us a lot of time to really process all the information we get.
Mm. Yeah, I think this concept of like disconnecting, which you've mentioned multiple times, is it's an important one. And I try to do it at least one day a week. And when you brought up Shabbat, I laugh at that
Yeah, I was
because I
gonna bring
remember.
this is my book that I called it
Mhm,
24/6
mhm.
instead of 24/7 because, yeah, text Shabbat, it's like my saving grace, really.
Yeah, I think I remember the first time, like, when I went to Israel, and I kinda knew what it was, and I've been in LA, so I know, but I didn't know, but it's something else to be, like, in an elevator that stops on every
Right,
floor,
the whole
to
country
remind you.
literally shuts
It's
down.
like it stopped on every single floor, like, all the little nuances, and then I thought about it, and I was like, "Wow," like, I was like, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I'm in media, so it makes sense for me to be in LA, but I'm like, "Wow, what if I lived in a world that was like that?" To where
It's
it's like a
very
reminder
profound.
and a reset, like, for families to be together, for people to spend time together, for community, like, it's a different way of life that much of that I prefer to what we're on right now.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's interesting because I don't do it for a religious reason, like,
Yeah,
in Israel, there are many religious Jews, like, it is a
yeah. Oh, no,
religious
for sure.
and so what I'm Jewish, but I was like, I have never needed more some kind of boundary of work
Yeah,
and rest, and here's this ancient ritual of
yeah,
Shabbat that if you go to Israel, the whole country shuts down, no buses,
yeah.
no nothing. You're
I
forced
remember.
to stay still, and so my
And
husband and
every
I
but the interesting part, though, is everything's still fine.
totally.
Everything functions, so we have this conception that's been kind of, whether it's fed to us or we fell into habit, I don't know, I'm not going there, but we have this concept that if we disconnect, it's not gonna be fine, but then you have a case study like Israel where when everything opens back up, guess what? Economy keeps going, business still go, like nothing disappeared, it's okay.
Yeah, it's really amazing to think about that, and so that's
Yeah.
ultimately why I ended up writing my book, is I was like, "Wow, I do yoga, I try to
Mhm.
meditate, and here's this other ancient, beautiful idea that's withstood thousands of years,
Mm.
and it's available to anyone." So that's why I called it 24/6 instead of Shabbat, because I wanted to almost, like,
Yeah.
remove the religion part and say, "This is just a brilliant idea that can change your life," and as a creative person,
Mhm.
it is literally the foundational moment of my week when Friday
Yeah.
night we have people over for dinner, we have a beautiful conversation, beautiful meal, and then
Yeah.
Saturday is just about me thinking and writing and, like, walking in nature, and then I'm excited to go back online every Saturday night, like, "What's happened? What's happened in the world?" And I think,
Yeah.
lately I'm mostly hoping for peace, that's what I'm hoping
Mhm.
happens when I come back on, but
Yeah.
I've now done this ritual for 14 years straight, and
Mm.
it's changed my life, and I think I've been more productive. That's the irony is that we think, "Oh, I have to be online, I have to be"
Yeah.
No, I'm more productive now when I've truly turned off and refreshed,
Yeah.
and
And I don't think that's just because you're a creative. I think any field would
yeah.
benefit from that. Just throwing that out there. Like, I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think that,
No, there's a
like.
lot of, like, business,
Mhm.
it there's the book well, I wrote it for my own practice, but a lot of
Yeah.
it's been listed as, like, a business book because
Yeah.
it's about time management, and that word sounds so, like, cold in some level, but it's a strategy. It's like,
Yeah.
how do I work smartly so I leave room for joy,
Mm.
creativity, and productivity, and really create some boundaries around all of
Mm.
those things. Because I think technology I mean, obviously, I've been thinking about technology a long time with founding the Webby Awards in my 20s.
Mhm.
It's made everything so blurry. It's blurred every distinction. You could be, like,
Mhm.
working from anywhere you can but actually, I think some boundaries are good. I
Yeah.
think we need some boundaries back.
Yeah. I'll tell you one of the funny blurs. I had this conversation last night, and it was that a particular person named Greg, founder of Above the Rim Consulting. So good guy. I've been working with him as an author for now a couple years now. He's been on the show probably like 2 times, maybe three in the last 3 years, let's call it. So we've had, probably 7 years of contact in our existence and know each other quite a bit of time, right? For somebody you haven't met. So yesterday we had this event in Orange County randomly, and I meet him in person, and there was a certain familiarity where I thought like it's like we knew each other, but we didn't know. It was that blur that you're talking about. It's
Exactly,
like
'cause you're
it's
like, "Have
that
we met?"
blur, even though that's the first time we've actually met, even though we spent hours together. And that blur, while in this case, I think it was a good thing because it was like we were familiar with each other, but in other ways and in other situations, that blur may not be appropriate. Like you, that blur could not be
Totally.
the best thing or concept for your psyche of giving you a connection to a person, let's say.
That's a great example of the blur. The
Uh,
blur of it all.
it threw me off though, Tiffany. I'm not joking
You're
because
like, "Have we met before?"
it
Kinda.
messed it with my receptors because I'm just like we know, and then I'm like Greg, and I'm like, and we know all this stuff about each other. The other funny blur, but that this was a two-way blur, I'll say, because I felt the same way. The other funny blur, which is in just in media in general, is when you meet somebody that's been maybe listening to your show for a long time. And I'm over 6,000 episodes in. So if you've been listening to me for the last 8 years, you know about my mom, you know about everything probably in
They
my
think
life.
they know you,
So
yeah.
then you meet that person and you're
Oh,
talking to
I have
them
that.
and they know
I have
everything
had
about you.
I have had a monthly newsletter for 25 years called
Oh my
Breakfast.
gosh. So then absolutely you
And
have
I'm
the blur.
always writing, like, something personal, and then what I'm working on, and then I highlight lots of important
Yeah.
things, and I'll walk up to people, and they'll say something like, I've been reading your newsletter for years," and it is I mean, and it makes me think about I don't tell all, like, I know some
Sure,
writers do
sure.
that. I don't do that because, like, there's
I
boundaries.
don't get that from you, but 20 some years, who knows? That first couple years, I don't know. We evolve as people.
It's always a choice, but I think also it was interesting. I just set up this woman and man,
Hmm.
and which I love to do in my spare time is fix people
Mm.
up. And at first I was like going to send them each an online reference to them, and then I was like, no, I'm just gonna have them meet. And so I didn't give them enough information so they could have looked each other up. But was deliberate about that because it was a little remember, like, when I met my
Yeah.
husband, we didn't know anything about each other, and it was really just our connection. Now you can do so much sleuthing before you meet
Wow.
someone, it's,
Yeah. Oh,
different.
that's good. I feel like that's your next show. That's short form content for
I'm not
shows.
letting you look up
It's
anything on the first
no, no, I want your matchmaking hobby to be content. That's fun. Yeah, you're
my
like
husband and I, we have, like one couple is recently breaking up, but they have
you like
3
how I like
very
how now I'm giving you work like Adam, did you just not hear about my year? Well, let me just throw my little idea out there, Tiffany, for your
well, I
creativity.
it's such a pleasure. I introduced this couple, like, 7 months ago. They're madly in love. They came to this party at our house, and I was like, "You 2 are my greatest work of art." I mean, like, you met, you're madly in love, like, it makes me so happy, and I feel so fortunate. I know how lucky
Yeah.
it was that I met my husband when I was
Mm,
26, and the older I get, we've been together, like, 27 years,
wow.
how rare that was, and
That
you
is.
don't realize it when you're young and in love, and now I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I am
Mm.
so lucky," and so I feel like a responsibility, like, if I can matchmake in my with my friends, it makes me so
Matchmaking with Tiffany. Come on, there we go. That's the you can come up with a better title, but this is a working title. So Tiffany, when is Matchmaking with Tiffany coming out? I mean, it could be
yeah,
a
no,
short
it's
form series. It could be a
that's that's
there's
my
inquiring minds like myself.
so
We got
funny.
your
I
first
usually
fan.
hate that expression "side hustle" because it sounds like you're a hustler or a prostitute, but I could say my side hustle is matchmaking because I do it for love. I do it just because it makes me so happy if we could connect.
Oh, for the love of matchmaking. I'm just still working on your title here. All right, so so I have to ask Tiffany, other than that, which is just my like, of course, not really what you're doing next. Like, what is next? What's next? Like, give me the vision. I know you got all the shows, everything else coming up. We got
Yeah, I
like
have a
what's
couple of big art, projects that expand on the dendrophenomenology. I'm working with tree rings to tell different stories. I'm
hmm,
working on it's kind of under wraps now, but I'm so excited about thinking of these tree rings as new ways to tell stories. So I have a lot of
hmm,
ideas for that. And I'm loving working with my hands. I've made films for a very long time, and now the physicality of working with my hands is very satisfying right now.
hmm. Amazing. Tiffany, if somebody wants to follow your work, you mentioned a
Yeah.
newsletter, like how do people
Yeah,
enter
the
your
best
world?
place to find everything is just TiffanyShlain.com, and there's no C in my last name, so just SHLAIN.com, and I'm on, Instagram and that, but
Mhm.
really, I think the best way to follow my work is my newsletter because I'm not on all the time, and
Yeah.
I just think a newsletter has a narrative, whereas the social media is like, it's just a slipstream, you don't know what you're seeing, so
Yeah.
if you go to TiffanyShlain.com, you can sign up for my monthly newsletter called Breakfast at
Mm.
Tiffany's, and yeah, that's a way to stay in touch.
Amazing. And for everybody watching, by the way, so we'll put that all of that information in the show notes so that you can just click on the links, head right on over, sign up for Breakfast with Tiffany's, and stay in the loop on what's going
Yeah,
on.
because the
And
new film's coming out soon, and all my films are on my site. I've made, like, 33 films, so they're all most of them are shorts. I like working in short form. I just made one feature, but they're all kind of
mm,
short films on big topics.
yeah. Amazing. And speaking of the audience, if don't forget, hit the subscribe button. We got more interviews coming up for you, and where we're going to be bringing Tiffany back on the show once the book's out. So you'll be looking forward to that interview as well. And Tiffany, I just want to say this has been so much fun to finally catch up, finally get to
Oh, it's
do this
such a
with you,
pleasure.
and get into the weeds in it and understand more about your process and your work. So thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on.
it's a pleasure to talk to you. Have a great day. Bye, Adam.